Monday at 6 o'clock. We're running a bit late, usually 6:30. So we're just saying before, Tech Talk, Tech Challenges. So for the first time in months, but I think it's a good omen, right? So as you know, my name is Robert Bonnick. Tonight we're going to be having a wonderful talk about the future. So we have an incredible guest, as we do every week, but tonight really incredible. So in a minute I'm going to introduce him, and it will be quite long, but you'll understand why once you hear me say it, okay? So let's just go for it, right? So, as we know, creating and integrating a vision of the future, SpeakuP Monday Destination Indonesia, is episode number 432. So David Shrier, sitting opposite me right now, the Managing Director of Visionary Future, we're going to delve into technology disruption and institutional innovation. So some key takeaways tonight, there'll be lots, but these are three that we will cover. The impact of technology on society and business, building innovative capacity in established organizations, and future insights or AI on AI, fintech, Web3, and digital identity. Now, a bit of background on David, but it is quite impressive. David Shrier is a venture builder and global expert leader in technology disruption, specializing in AI, fintech, Web3, cybersecurity, and digital identity. He leads Visionary Future and is a professor of practice at Imperial College Business School in London. David has published 9 books in 9 years on technology, impact on society, and developed $10 billion in corporate venturing opportunities. We're halfway through. He has advised.
I'll just go with 1 second. Please keep going.
But not today. Yeah. He has advised and worked with top enterprises, leading private equity and financial sponsors. He also led an oversubscribed IPO on the NYSE, New York Stock Exchange, and a subsequent de-SPAC into Grid Infrastructure, GRID. And of course, I'm your host, Robert Bonnick, international speaker, author, advisor, founder of SpeakuP Monday, Destination Indonesia, and obviously co-partner of the hospitality venture. We scaled to number 3 in the world. We're endorsed by Forbes Business Council, recognized as the Bali #1 change maker, also an F1 mentor for the largest accelerator in the world, which is Founder Institute, and obviously highly decorated for our social work in Bali. And that's it! Actually, I should figure out some of the questions on. So, David, first welcome. We'd love to get your insight in something non-tech. What is your impression of Bali? Like, is this the first time that you've been here? What's your feeling? What comes up?
Yeah, so thank you, Robert, for having me here tonight. Thank you all here in person and also online for joining us. Bob, the weather is lovely. It's a little humid, but the lights are definitely intense, but it's quite nice. The scooters are not so great for my asthma, so if you hear me coughing, I promise you it's not COVID. It's asthma, but that's been a little rough. But Bali's lovely. It's my first trip. I've been to Southeast Asia several times. I've done a lot of work in the region, but this is my very first trip to Bali, so of course I'll be back.
Love it. And we're going to do Bob Wisdom, because this man also broadcasts like I maybe switching his mic down a little bit, otherwise it might distort. Okay.
Yeah, I'm used to projecting without a mic, so.
That's good. It's a good skill. So look, tech. So maybe the first question for me was that, how did you know that future disruption was going to be an industry or a hobby or a working opportunity for you in your life? Was there some kind of, opportunities or coincidences or moments that kind of drove you in that direction?
Oh gosh, it's 2020 hindsight. My career is definitely not a pre-planned career. I think I am the poster child for be aware of the opportunities around you and be open to them. So I was really into the future from a very young age. So just to start at the end and work backwards. Today I run a venture studio. We have a 30-company portfolio. That is our startup activity. And then I also advise Global 2000 companies through Visionary Future Advisors. So we have about 40 consultants who work with us to help drive new growth for businesses. This was not a planned career, and then there's this academic thing on the side. I started out fascinated by the future at a young age, and kind of this question of how technology could solve big problems. And I got inspired by science fiction. So I read a lot of Isaac Asimov as a kid, I read a lot of Robert Heinlein, I was into science fiction movies, I was into Star Wars, I was into Star Trek, and these people, these fabulous, who kind of imagined what the future might be like, were really inspirational to me from a very young age. So I wrote my first computer program on a punch card when I was 5 years old. It was like 1 + 1 = 2. It was not profound, but I started playing with computers even before they were truly digital. So I thought they were interesting, but I wasn't really interested in computers as a career. I was interested in how they could solve problems. And that's probably been a red thread through my life, is how do we solve problems with technology? So my degree, undergraduate at university, was in theater and neuroscience. So yeah, I worked on the original production of Rent off-Broadway. I mean, when I say worked on, I held the clipboard for the casting director. This was like a very junior job, but I got to see up close the creation of the first rock musical for, the new era. So that was really interesting. But I concluded there was no way to make a living, so I got a job on Wall Street, and the rest is quite a story.
So going to the rest is quite a story. So one of the things which I look back, right, we're 54 years of age now. I look back and I think, and one lady here, Aussie Mercedes, over here from Sydney, Aussie, welcome, thanks for flying. Like she's seen me in the incarnations where I was running clubs, right, bringing thousands of people together. We worked out, we did 2,000 events, attracting over 1 million people over about 15 years. This is product launches, club nights, like any kind of event, festivals, I've kind of done it, right? From a production point, from a from an event producer standpoint, from the standpoint of also being on the ground and working and shaking hands, kissing babies, as we used to say. So the thing which always inspired me was this understanding that no matter what our skin color, background, hair, we can find ways to connect with each other in a point that we can now work together and trust each other. And magic can happen from there. So I've introduced hundreds of thousands of people over the years, managers, businesses, you name it, right? So when you look back over your life, and you mentioned a little bit earlier, is there anything else that you see that kind of has galvanized part of you inside, not the business side necessarily, but inside that you bring to futurism as such?
Well, my family has a long tradition of service. So my parents instilled that into us. So my mother was a psychiatrist working in inner city Newark, providing mental health services to underprivileged people. My brother works for the U.S. State Department. He spent his whole career he was in like Kandahar, and he's been to some pretty interesting places in his career. My sisters both have been through sort of academia, and one of them is still to this day providing, again, medical services to people who can't afford sort of, private clinics. So sort of growing up in that environment, that has definitely colored my view of what we should do with the gifts that we've been given, right? So my investment portfolio is absolutely for profit. And I've decided, the best ways to make a profit is to solve really big problems. And it turns out that a lot of them have a public benefit. If you help 1 billion people with something, you can make money at it, and you can help 1 billion people with something. But for my true public service, I devote a lot of my time to my work at now Imperial College London, where we're trying to make the world, safe from AI and safe with AI, and sort of, deliver on the promise of UN Sustainable Development Goals using AI. And that's all sort of this idea of technology can solve big problems at scale. And so, I devote a lot of time and effort and love to my students and to my collaborators. I'm here in the Southeast Asia because we're working on a project, for example, with PayNet in Malaysia. So the government-owned payment system, we're trying to help provide better financial services to not just people in Malaysia, but to the whole ASEAN region. So that's just an example of some of the things that I get into.
So we haven't met just so you know. So the first one I'm speaking to now,
We met 25 minutes ago.
25 minutes
Half an hour.
to be precise. So this is the longest I've spoken. So it also is a surprise to me that you have that strict. In a way, it's not a surprise, but I enjoy hearing about it. You know that your family is service-driven. I enjoy hearing the fact that you're a futurist, which most people here kind of pair together with AI, but you're also working on both sides. So it tells me that you're a human being who also knows what his responsibility is. Right? And again, responsibility isn't something that you're given, it's something you accept. But from just the way that you're talking, the way that you're speaking, and your background, it kind of, I like it. I enjoy hearing it.
Well, and we keep bringing up the future, and so kind of the first takeaway for tonight is the future doesn't just happen to us. So it took me a long time to come up with a label to describe what I do for a living. And I landed on futurist, and people say, oh, you're a futurologist. I said, no. I said futurist. A futurologist is someone who talks about the future. A futurist is someone who makes the future happen. And that's something important for all of you to think about. As we've heard the introductions, everyone has very interesting and different backgrounds. The future doesn't just happen to you. You get to decide what future we are going to have 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And given the potential futures that could happen to us, it's really incumbent on everyone here to choose a better path.
Love it. And so on the values, right, and then we'll skip to the thing, the tactics that everyone wants to hear. But on the values, right, so if I asked you, hey David, very successful in what you're doing, great definition of futurist and futurologist, love that, thank you, great distinction. So what would you say then would be the top 3 values that you have that gift you with the opportunity to do what you do successfully? Top 3 values.
Well, the first one is, and I don't want to use a cliche, so let's just sort of think, without having done deep study of religion, I do believe that, we are on a journey and we're trying to improve ourselves, and when we get to certain places in our journey, it's incumbent on us to help people who are not as far along the path, right? So that is helping others is kind of that first value, but specifically in this context of helping others elevate, right? The second one is definitely a commitment to excellence. If you're going to wake up and do something every day, do it well. Like, why should you do something poorly? People do that. A lot of people sleepwalk through life. Don't. Do it well, right? And the third one is, do it with love and compassion. So, I think that what separates us from the machines is we have a human heart, and I mean that metaphorically. We have the ability to relate with others and to care about others, and I think that's incumbent on us to express and to develop as we go through life.
Like one of the things which comes out when we talk about, you mentioned the word AI. I never want to get to the tactics, people. Promise. So there are a sector of the population which it's like kind of like Terminator style, right? Now, this question you've had before. I'm sure you have, but maybe one question has a different take on it. So, what is it now? Could you speak about the future being created by the present moment, which I love, right? So what is it now? Which quality is it incumbent upon us and those driving this forward? Which quality is incumbent on us to cultivate to ensure that the future, in this respect, is in a place where we want it to go for the good reasons, let's say? Try not to lead you too much with this.
Yeah, no, look, and this is a nice bridge into the discussion of tactics. So it's important to come from a mindset of abundance, not scarcity. So when I have seen people screw up corporate innovation or screw up their startups, it's because they get very closed in and they think it's a zero-sum game, and they think, I have to win, so that therefore you need to lose. And someone else succeeding means I'm losing, so I have to take them down so they don't succeed. That's a scarcity mindset. And we're seeing this play out with some of the adoption of AI, where you see corporate CEOs who have a half-life. They have a tenure of 3.8 years in the S&P 500. So they're not around for a long time. Innovation takes 5 to 7 years to pay out. The life cycle of the Fortune 500 CEO is 3.8 years on average, which means that they don't get paid to innovate. They get paid to fire people because that shows up in a quarter or two. And AI is the Doritos, the crack cocaine of firing people. This is something which, applied one way, it can be used to lay a lot of people off, juice corporate returns for a few quarters, and then by the time everything comes crashing down because you've destroyed your institutional knowledge and culture, that CEO has parachuted out and some new CEO has to come in and they have to deal with cleaning it up. On the other hand, AI is a capacity expander. It's a force multiplier. You could be 10 times as big with the same number of people. So more CEOs need to embrace that, and more rank and file managers need to embrace that. So there's some great ECG research that shows that long-termism, CEOs who project forward 10, 15, 20 years, have a more than 80% better return on equity. More than 80% better return on equity than CEOs who are focused on short-termism. But everyone goes for those short-term earnings because they get that little stock price pop, they get that instant gratification, and AI has a chance to do that at scale, and that's really scary. I mean, I know one of the 5 largest banks in the world has hired, and I work a lot in financial services, although certainly not exclusively, they hired effectively an SVP of ChatGPT. I mean, that's not really his title, but he said that I met him at an event in San Francisco, and he said, my job is to fire 25,000 call center agents and replace them with generative AI. And so that is going to be a huge boost to earnings for that bank. But if everyone does that, you destroy society because now everyone's unemployed. Now who's going to pay for the goods and services that drive the economy? The answer is no one. I mean, you look at what happened to the economy during COVID when we hit sort of a 12% peak unemployment, and that was tough, but then the economy reshuffled. But if you have 30, 50% long-term structural unemployment, you're going to have riots in the street. You're going to have revolution. And we are all better served by not having that future, but by having the abundance future.
We had a wonderful guest about 4 weeks ago, Dr. Mary Ryback. Okay? So, let me tell you a little bit about her. So she was voted, she was awarded one of the 9 most innovative women in the European Union. She was also awarded the most valuable person in the Netherlands. And then she basically is from her mystery is the cybersecurity realm, but her whole talk was about next generation social enterprise.
Yeah.
Right? So, fantastic lady. If you haven't seen that interview, go back and see it. She is amazing, right? So Dr. Mary Ryback, right? US, but has been living in Amsterdam for 25 years or something. So in her field, all of her competitors exited their companies for tens of millions and up. She gave her company away for $1. Okay? And in doing so, she set a tone, right? Now, she isn't for putting down the present current reality of entrepreneurship. She's about how do we move from here to there without destroying the past. And it's a tipping point. So not everyone will do this, but the ones that do can. So if I say to you, before we even start the topic in a way, so what would next generation social enterprise look like from a futuristic standpoint?
Well, we're working to answer that question. I'd lie if I tell you I have a solid answer, but let me explore this a little. How's my level, by the way? Am I okay? I know I tend to project. So let's see. Well, Sam Altman said that very soon, maybe now already, someone is going to found $1 billion company that will have 1 employee. That AI is that profound a force multiplier to drive scale, right? And if you think about that and you apply that to social problems, to the problems of humanity, what that means is we've now eliminated the resource scarcity of expertise and labor. If you can think of a solution to a problem, you as one individual now can have the same impact as a company that had thousands of employees. So there's a potential, at least the potential, that we're going to have some amazing social enterprises come up that we didn't used to be able to fund. But now, today, you can just fund one salary and a bunch of server time, and server time is getting cheaper and cheaper. So that would be my exciting, positive view of the future, right? I mean, if we do it right, that just the AI piece of digital revolution, and there are many pieces to the digital revolution, could drive $12 trillion of incremental GDP globally. And to put that in context, GDP has been growing about 1% a year for the last 10 or 15 years. That is slow compared to what it had been doing for the prior 4 years. So everyone's sort of sitting there going, what happened to GDP? It's growing globally. It's growing much slower. We've sort of milked all of the productivity gains out of IT, and there's nothing left. The theory is that we could double productivity growth over the next 10 years. We could get back to the expansion we saw in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And that could create more prosperity for everyone, more schools, and more food, and more electricity, and more everything else. That is a possible future. I'm not saying it's the one we're destined for, but it is within the realm of something we could create right now and over the next 10 years. So social enterprises can help sort of live off of that prosperity and even enable it. So I had the privilege when I was at MIT of working with a guy named Sandy Pentland. And look him up, Alex Pentland. He's a really interesting guy. But one of the classes that he taught at MIT was called Development Ventures. Now it's called Global Ventures. And the design constraint of the class, so he had 4,000 entrepreneurs go through this class over the years. And the design constraint is solve a problem for 1 billion people. And it has to be outside of the OECD. You notice I didn't say start a company. I said solve a problem. But you can't help 1 billion people with charity. Even Bill Gates, with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, cannot help 1 billion people with really profound problems. You have to have the people who are sort of the recipients of that thing be involved economically in making it happen. And so out of this class, for example, came what was at one point the largest mobile internet provider in India, this company called Jana, because they recognized that people will take a marketing action in exchange for minutes. And the rate limiting factor on digital on-ramps, on digital onboarding, was access. So everyone had these devices, these phones that could get them onto the phone systems. They didn't have any minutes, so they couldn't do anything. They had these bricks in their hands. And he figured out, that the entrepreneur behind this, Nathan Eagle, figured out that if you give someone a marketing benefit, the brand companies will pay for it, and you can give people minutes and get them on the internet. So that's just one of several. Synergy was another company that came out of that program, and that is turning latrines in the developing world into biofuel reactors. So I guess we have youth in the audience, so let's just use the polite term for it, say they're turning crap into gold. That's not actually what the T-shirts say, but you get the idea. So again, it's taking novel solutions to problems and putting an economic model around it so that you can actually scale it to help 1 billion people as opposed to 10,000 people or 100 people or what have you.
Okay, so 2 things. Firstly,
You asked me hard questions, so it took me a while to get there.
it's okay, Bob. So Bruce, what we're going to do at 7 o'clock, I want to go to the audience for questions. So anyone in the audience, tell everyone we're 5 minutes to 7, okay? All right, so... All right, so what we got is 5 weeks ago, so we had a guy called Dr. Subal Musa, right? Dr. Subal Musa is head of the MBA program at Swiss German University, which is the first international university in Indonesia, okay? Great guy. We spoke about Indonesia from an investment standpoint. So but we looked at 3 filters. So one being socio-economic, one being socio-political, and the other one being socio-cultural. Socio-economic, socio-political, socio-cultural. So, my question to you is, picking up on the trends that you've observed personally, so this is your opinion, okay? When you look at the world from this futuristic, from this future lens, when you look at the socio-economic, the socio-political, and the socio-cultural, what do you see positively, and what do you see is reason for caution?
All right, well, I'll start with the reason for caution, which is we've allowed social media to fragment society. Everyone thought it would be this great connector, it would bring us all together. The internet, the promise of the internet was originally, it's going to be much easier for all of us to connect. And instead, it has pushed us further and further apart. So that is a continued reason for caution and a point of great concern. And so gatherings like this are great, where there are people here live in the audience who are going to chat with each other after our talk is done. And that's probably going to be the most interesting part of the whole evening. The reason for hope is back to this original idea that technology could help solve a lot of these really, really big, intractable problems that we didn't think we could solve. So I'll give you 3 examples. Okay, so I have one portfolio company called the Emissions Capture Company, Echo. This is using AI to build a digital twin of the chemical reactions going on inside a smokestack. And then it acts as a control system to change the reactions and pull carbon dioxide out of the smokestack at the point of production using an AI modeling and control system. So they're using technology to solve human pollution problems. That's kind of interesting. It's particularly interesting given the fact that our energy demands keep growing and we're overstraining the grid, and so we keep using fossil fuels. So if we can make the bad things that AI is creating, which is more energy demand, which therefore creates more pollution, we can now use AI to take that pollution out of the system. That's kind of interesting. The second one is called Dandelion Science. So Dandelion Science is trying to solve really serious central nervous system and mental health disorders without pills, without shots, and without implants. So Neuralink is an implant. They put a chip in your head. Dandelion is using visual imagery. It's something called neuromodulation to actually treat serious mental health problems and CNS problems. And if we succeed with that, we're going to take a $100 billion category, and we're going to turn it into a $1 trillion category, because we're going to be able to solve problems that we couldn't solve before. The third one, and I spent some time in digital health, it just happens to be what I'm talking about here today. The third one is called Forum, with a PH, P-H-O-R-U-M. And Forum is solving the problem of scaling up very complicated biological pharmaceuticals. So the COVID vaccines that helped stave off a global pandemic, the most successful one was the Moderna vaccine, which was an mRNA vaccine. This is very complicated to produce. Ozempic, everyone heard about Ozempic, the miracle weight loss drug? This is a peptide therapeutic. There are shortages of Ozempic all over the world, which impacts people who have diabetes, because people really want this drug and it's really hard to make. So Forum solves this problem using AI to tell you how to make the drug at scale, to how to deal with the manufacturing scale-up problem. So those are 3 examples of how we're using technology to solve some very serious problems of human health and climate and the environment.
Wonderful. So time check. What's time, Ozzy?
It is 5 past.
Wonderful. Right. So we have 3 questions that are going to you, the audience. So the impact of technology on society and business, we kind of covered that. Building innovative capacity in established organizations. What would you say about that?
I'll give the pithy version of this. So, important rule of thumb in this. I've worked in a lot of different large enterprises, and what I've learned is there are 3 things that we come across. You can get something done, you can get along with people, and you can get credit for doing it. Pick one of those 3. Maybe 2. You can't get all 3. Innovation, building new things, is very scary and threatening for most people in an organization. So if you build something new, you will become a target. So if you have air cover, maybe your boss is able to take credit for your project. Your boss gets credit, you get something done, and you kind of get along with people. If you try to get something done and get credit, people won't like you. If you get along with people, you're never going to get innovative things done. You'll get incremental things done, but you're not going to get transformational innovation done. You're not going to do something that completely disrupts the organization, because guess what? If you disrupt the organization, you piss a lot of people off. Yes. So remember this rule of 3. Get something done, get credit, and get along. Pick 1 or 2 of those, because you're not going to get all 3.
That's cool. Okay, future insights from AI, fintech, Web3, and digital identity. We covered some of those, but maybe not digital identity.
Yeah, I mean, and I have, digital identity is a story of failure many times over, including my own. So I've tried and failed to build a new digital identity, but I haven't given up. I have hope. We have the technology to do it. There's a willpower issue and a systemic change issue. right? So identity theft is becoming much more prevalent now in the age of AI. So we probably saw the story of the finance executive in Hong Kong who wired $25 million, I think it was, if not pound, no, it was pounds, sorry, 25 million pounds out of the country into a blank account, and it was gone. This was someone who received a note from the CFO, and he didn't just send the money out. He insisted on a voice verification, video verification, which is what you're supposed to do. So he gets on a Zoom conference call, maybe it wasn't Zoom, gets on a video conference call, and there's the CFO, and there's like 3 other people in the finance department, and they have this lengthy conversation, and they're speaking, it seems natural. The CFO was a deep fake. The other 3 people in the finance department were deep fakes. They copied not only the voice, but also the mannerisms and the face. And this was like, convinced the guy to wire the money. So, we had an identity crisis that we already had a problem with digital identity before. Now it's getting much worse. And so we have the tools to solve this problem. We lack the willpower to pay for it. Cybersecurity is always something that people say, oh, we should have had better cybersecurity. And then they don't invest in it because it looks like a loss leader. And then the next major cyber incident happens.
So true. So we're going to have questions. So here's one. So hands up, Alex, we'll start with you. So just raise your hand if you have a question, everybody. 1, 2, especially that way we can do one area first. So in this area here, is there anyone else who has any questions? Yeah? No?
We had one from before.
Yeah, the one there, we've got Michael. Cool. So Alex, we start with, by the way, with the questions, we've got a little time, so try and get straight to the question will be great. Straight to the point. You'll be on camera too, by the way. Maybe. Go.
So David, you recently wrote a white paper for the UN on the sovereignty of AI for developing nations. Maybe could you elaborate a little bit further for the audience on why developing nations, developing countries, like Indonesia as an example, should be focusing on AI sovereignty?
Yeah, so we're working on a white paper. So there was a blog post for the UN, which you can find online if you look it up. It was in April, I think. But we were working on a much lengthier white paper. And we came across probably a dozen different reasons why countries are looking at sovereign AI, meaning an AI that is significantly controlled within the country or by the country. Not necessarily by the government, but by the country. You notice I make the distinction. And one of the reasons is because right now, most of the AI tech out there that's any good, that we are all excited about, is controlled by half a dozen businesses, which are primarily U.S. corporations. And there is even Mistral, France's great answer to the AI crisis, is now a Microsoft subsidiary, effectively. And so the fear is Donald Trump has already announced that he will engage in a trade war if he is elected president. And there is a fear that he will exercise his constitutional prerogatives to cut off access to these AI models, which is within the power of the president. No U.S. president prior to Trump would have dreamed of doing such a thing. But this potential president has announced he will engage in a trade war, and AI is on the table. So a lot of countries are saying, well, we should have an alternative because everyone wants to use these things, and we need a backup plan. And the good news is there are a lot of open source solutions that can help nations now engage in control over their own destiny. So another reason is cultural and value-driven inculcation into the system. So 6 people who work for any one of these, OpenAI, Google, pick your company, 6 individuals chose the values that went into that system. Right? 6 employees of a privately owned company. And those values often reflect the values of someone who lives in Silicon Valley, which you may or may not agree with, but a number of countries have said, we don't think those values reflect our values. So Germany, for example, is investing about 4 billion euro in creating its own GPT and its own AI university to build capacity to be able to create AI. Switzerland is doing something. Japan is doing something. Singapore is putting a lot of money. A lot of countries are now saying, hey, we need to have a national AI strategy that includes national security around AI and that has our AI reflecting our values. And so that's something that Indonesia should give some thought to.
Alex, brilliant. Thank you. Michael.
David, thanks a lot for coming here. All interesting thoughts. One thing, I had a question earlier already. So within the next 5, 10, 15 years, we know AI is accelerating, technology innovation is accelerating rapidly.
I just want to have your thoughts on the following scenario. I'm using AI to increase my productivity. I've got two choices. I take the time, take care of my mental health and my society, my family, my friends, and spend the time, or I even take the more AI and improve the productivity. So where are we coming with that in the term of society? How will it change and affect the use of AI in a daily life?
Well, I have an aspiration. So, and I'm going to paraphrase John Adams, who was one of the, as you can probably tell from my accent, I was born in the U.S., but I live in London now. He said, I study war and politics so that my sons may study business and commerce. My sons study business and commerce so that their children may study art and philosophy. His dream, his aspiration was that society could become prosperous enough that we could explore humanism rather than just grubbing for money. And so in a dream world, that is where we could go with this AI prosperity. We're not heading there right now. The profit motive is too strong. And I am a capitalist because I think you have to pay for this stuff somehow. But capitalism is not the same thing as unfettered free market capitalism. And I think that it is a good thing to take some of the prosperity that capitalism generates and use it to help broader society. What form that takes, we're not sure yet. We urgently need to figure that out. So some people say universal basic income, and they sort of wave their hands. And the data is inconclusive as to whether or not UBI works. But if UBI doesn't work, we need some other kind of social safety net because, Viz, my earlier comment, we're going to throw a third of the workforce out of work over the next 10 years. What are we going to do with all those people? We have to do something other than throwing them on the streets.
Great question, great answer. So just, I mentioned it a week, John Meacham. Anyone heard of John Meacham before? Interesting straw poll. Good. John Meacham is a writer, but primarily an historian. So his premise or his purview is the following: history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. Yeah? So history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. So there's two things which are really important. Number one is when we feel or believe or know that we're in an unprecedented time, right? What he does is that he extrapolates that and matches it to something else that happened 20, 100, 1,000, 2,000 years ago. Describes the situation around them to the point where you say, you know what, this is pretty similar actually. So you get an in-depth, number one, of we've faced this before and how we dealt with it before. Number two, and this one I really love, which I've always been doing, is that when you meet somebody, because at the fundamental essence of these learning systems is human beings, right? So our consciousness will go into whatever we create, right? So in many ways, it's about how do you come to terms with the consciousness first before you create. So here's an example. So this is not us, right? Could be next week. If you meet someone who has diametrically opposed views. Years ago, it was a case of saying, you know what, I don't like what you have to say, but we can still go for a coffee. Now it feels like, I don't like what you say, I'm going to out you, and I'm never going to speak to you again. Right? So it's a little bit more combative and confrontative now. So here it is, 3 steps. Step number 1 is, curiosity. So it's this view of why is it that this person, talking to you now, has this viewpoint. What happened in their life early on for them to harbor this point of view and stick to it in such a powerful, strong way, number 1. Number 2 is then humility, meaning if I had the same background as you did, David, then perhaps I might become the next futurist. Maybe, maybe not. But the thing is that I can at least put myself in your shoes. So number 1, curiosity. What has made this person, what actions, incidents happened in their life for them to hold this viewpoint. Number 2, humility. If I was in the same position, I would probably be the same way, if not worse. The number 3 leads to compassion, which is now understanding why they are the way they are, and maybe now you can reach a point which is, I still don't believe what he's saying, I still don't like his viewpoint, but you know what, he might have a point. From this place is a place that we can then build. So there's a book called Soul of America. Soul of America, that's the book that John Meacham wrote, which applies to this. incredible book, and a documentary. So Soul of America. Okay, next question, my brother. Was you? Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
I was really interested in the part of the talk where you talked about long-termism and short-termism, and I really believe that short-term thinking is one of the biggest reasons for dysfunction in business and probably in society as well, and also in our personal lives as well, maybe. I just wondered if you had any thoughts about how we can overcome that short-term, especially what you talked about with regard to CEOs maybe only being in the business for three or 4 years. Same for probably most of the C-suite. Probably most people in their career these days are only within the business for 2-3 years. But the things that people need to put in place within the business, they need to be like long-term thinking. Have you got any thoughts on how maybe tech can help that? But maybe even a more broader question is, philosophically, how can we overcome that?
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's important to develop an aspiration, have some hope for the future, and then to develop intestinal fortitude is what I call it. Stick to it. This grit is a shorter word some people use for this, and stick with that vision. So there's a gentleman I met many years ago named James Gifford, who was working with the UN, and he said, we really should, we need to change how businesses are dealing with society, and we need to get business focused on solving humanity's biggest problems. But business is just in it for profit. How do we do that? And he took a systems level view of this, and it took him 15 years. But he got more than 90% of the world's assets to commit to the UN Principles for Responsible Investment, the PRI. But it took 15 years to get to that scale. But now, most investment funds tell their companies that they hold ownings in, that they own, hold ownership in, that they have to comply with the UN PRI. So he said, okay, the way to get those short-term CEOs and those boards of directors to behave is to get their stakeholders, the investment funds that control them, to tell them what to do. So he went upstream and he enlisted. It was a very slow process. Took a long time. He had to travel all over the world, but he got people on board. But it took a long time. Another one is GDPR. Now, I know a lot of people who do business in Europe complain about GDPR. But it is reclaiming your personal data from Mark Zuckerberg and other monopolists who are using it just for their own personal profit. Sandy Penland and the World Economic Forum Privacy Working Group began working on GDPR 20 years ago. It took a long time for WEF to develop a point of view around it, and then for the WEF Working Group to feed into the EU, and then the EU took a long time. So I was involved with the EU AI Act. That took 4 years. That was fast by EU standards, and it's definitely flawed, but it's something. It's some kind of protection around AI and enablement for AI entrepreneurs. GDPR took longer. And so these are people who had a vision. They projected forward to a more hopeful future, and then they stuck with it. They stuck with it for a really long time. So grit is a mindset you have to develop.
Guys, we've got some chairs for you. It's okay, we've got some chairs. So, Hadis, yeah, I've got some chairs for you guys here. All good. Okay, questions on this side. Maybe time for about 3. I know you have one. Yes, so straight in here, but right. By the way, while we get that to you, next week is health. So once the first Monday of every month, we have an incredible, what is it? It's a partnership with Health of Bali, who are Health Tourism Initiative leading the way to roll out Bali integrated medical tourism model. If you want to know what that is, ask me afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd just be curious to understand, we've obviously been speaking about AI for a few decades. Over the last few years, it's just exploded. It's just dominating the dialogue in all domains, all departments. What was the major breakthrough in the technology that sparked this whole explosion?
Yeah. Let me try and do the 60-second version. We invented AI in the 1940s, but it was only good for very specialized things. We then developed machine learning in the 1980s. 1980, we began using it for things like banks and travel for airlines. Again, very specialized facial recognition, very specialized applications. Probably about, it's now almost 20 years ago, we began poking around how to make AI deal with the scaling problem, to actually be useful in very large amounts of data. It took them 10 years, but in 2015 or so, 2012 to 2015, we had a breakthrough in something called deep learning. And so IBM Watson came out, Siri came out, and then Google open sourced their library of deep learning. And that, TensorFlow being open sourced, was the tipping point. So all these AI companies, the big ones that we see people talking about now, OpenAI among them, they all got started after Google open sourced TensorFlow and then subsequently open sourced something called Transformers. So 2015, 2016, 2018 are milestone years where AI technology, really, really powerful stuff, suddenly became available to anyone in technology. 2023 is when it became available to everyone else. Because now you can just talk to the AI and it will give you useful stuff.
Great question, great answer. Question for you, which comes up. Yeah, anyone else question over there? Put your hand up. Lawrence behind you. So pass it behind you. That handsome fellow with glasses. All right.
We've been talking a lot about AI.
No, I was about to answer. Lawrence, we're going to hold that question.
You had a question on climate.
Let's wait a second. So here's the thing, right? So you've done interviews many times. You've been a fantastic guest. Love your energy, love your flow, the way that you break things down to their constituent elements to make it easy to follow, right? Okay, good. What question, if any, do you wish that you have been asked that you haven't, and then give us the answer to that question? So again, I'll say it again. So what question is it recently that comes up for you that you wish that you had been asked but haven't, and what would be the answer to that question?
What gets you up in the morning? And it's my kids. Not literally, they're now going off to college, but you know, I look to how I inspire them, and they in turn inspire me. And so I encourage all of you to think about finding your sources of inspiration. That's our 5-minute warning.
5-minute countdown. All right. Okay, well, thank you. Amazing, good words. No one has other questions. Go for it.
Quick question. So David, I love your 3 choices on organizational transformation. I've been talking to a lot of corporate leaders, sustainability and climate. It kind of feels we're the same place we were 10 years ago with the digital transformation. Deny for as long as possible, do as little as possible, then tick the box, etc., etc. Do you see those similarities, and how you engage them, if so?
Yeah. Right, let's pass the mic from back over here. Thank you. Yeah.
So we're working on this problem right now. So one of the books I have under, so my book out this year is on AI. It's called Basic AI, A Human Guide to Artificial Intelligence. But the book that we have under contract with MIT Press is called Accelerating Climate Innovation. And we got a bunch of thought leaders in climate together at the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos, and we brainstormed, what would it take to unlock transformational change in climate, and we came up with a series of recommendations. So if you go on my LinkedIn, you can find like the list of recommendations we made, but we're turning into a book. And the short answer is, this is such a big problem. Private sector can't get there alone. Government can't get there alone. Nonprofit can't get there alone. We need to develop ecosystems and systemic organizations. So public-private partnerships and enabling environments. So we need policy that can drive change at scale, that can enable private sector to then, sort of drive the change.
Beautiful. Last question. Bonnie, before the question, we're going to grab a photo of you, me, and then Alex, then everybody in. So don't go anywhere. Your question.
I just wanted to ask, I was quite interested in hearing that Rob was bringing a futurist, and one of the things that I've discovered most recently working back in corporate was I was identified as a futurist, and there's quite a few grads, graduate guys coming through the programs, and they asked me, how do you become a futurist? What did you do? So I'm curious to know, if you were asked that question by young people moving up through the ranks, how do you become a futurist and get labelled a futurist?
Oh boy, it's a kiss of death is what you do in a large organization. Look, I could give you some flip answers. So I could say something like, claim the title and then earn it and get people to pay you for it. And that's a gross oversimplification of how I became a futurist, is that I started talking to people about the future and then helping them create futures, and I got them to pay me to do that. I didn't get paid enough, but I got paid a little, and I made a living at it. And so I don't encourage it as a career choice, but all of us can have a little bit of a futurist in us in the following way. We can pick an aspiration, some goal, some dream that we want to achieve, and we can not only drive towards that goal personally, but help other people go for that goal. And so one of the things we do in Visionary Future is we work with corporations to come up with visions 5, 10, 15 years, and we help them execute on those visions. So I have a client where we're imagining a roadmap 15 years forward. And we talked about AI and blockchain, Web3, and the CEO came back and said, I don't want to hire you for that. I can get that from McKinsey or BCG or Bain. You guys do the really crazy sci-fi stuff. Tell me the really out there stuff. So we came up with a completely different set of future technologies. And then we started working with them, and the chief innovation officer was like, well, our own people will never be able to imagine that. I said, you'd be surprised. And I had this happen with a couple of different people in a very short period of time. I get them in a room, and I give them permission to imagine. What if? What if we could solve the climate crisis? What would the world look like 10 years from now? And then work backwards to today to figure out how we get there. And you'd be surprised at how many people, if you put them in a safe environment and tell them it's okay to look foolish, how many people come up with really good ideas of how we could get to that new future. So everyone can acquire the skills of a futurist. I don't recommend it as a career path for any young person.
Great question, Ozzy. Thank you very much indeed. So what I'm going to do now, in about 30 seconds time, maybe a minute, any closing words. So this could be something that we're reiterating what you said before, or it might be something that, hey, I want to share this one thing. Okay, we've got about 45 seconds to think about what that might be. Firstly, I just want to thank you, David, for coming. Thank you, Alex, colleague, for working it out and bringing us together. I've really enjoyed this for sure with my usual show, but I'm going to watch that again. There's going to be things that I've definitely garnered. Thank you for the audience, for coming from Australia and all sorts of places today. Really appreciate you being here. Remember that after this, don't go. Like, these people here next to you, in front of you, behind you, hold the key for where you need to go next. Trust me, it always works. Finally, Dr. Guzman and Hadis and Ayu from Tropical Nomad, thank you very much again indeed. We're here every Monday, the last 255 episodes. Tonight has been episode 432. Next week is health. So first Monday of every month, Health Hub Bali is a collaboration, a connection, a partnership that we have together. Tracy's awesome. It's the next installment of how we make Bali integrated medical tourism model roll out here in Bali. All right, so please, over to you.
Okay, so I am going to borrow from words of people who are smarter than me. Innovation is really hard. It is really, really hard. But it's very rewarding when you do it. And so I'm gonna borrow from the Serenity Prayer, right? So first of all, we're gonna find something that inspires you. Figure out who inspires you, what inspires you, and then you want to have the courage to stick with that inspiration and make those changes to drive that new future. You want to have the patience to endure the things that you can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Love it. Round of applause, David Shrier. All right, stay with